Good evening. Welcome to Girlfriend Therapy Radio. I am your host, Kwanzaa. I am excited to be here this evening, guys. It's been a long week. I don't know if it's because of the weather changing and all that stuff. I actually noticed here sitting in the studio that it is dark now. I know the past few weeks it hasn't been dark when I've been sitting in the studio, so I need to get my lighting game up. You guys actually posted a picture on social media. You guys can see all my little lights that I have around me to kind of help set the atmosphere and the ambiance and all that wonderful stuff. But welcome to Girlfriend Therapy Radio. I'm excited for tonight's show. As you guys remember, last week I actually did just kind of did an uncut, uncensored, and I got a lot of great feedback about that. So I guess you guys like it when I'm just a little, I guess uncut and uncensored. But I got some great feedback. Thank you guys for reaching back and telling me how much you enjoyed last week's show. I absolutely enjoyed doing the show, so I'm glad that you guys liked it. But tonight we're going to get back into our usual roundup, get back into our line of our usual show line. And so without further ado, you guys know I usually start off the show talking about the top trending topic. And so tonight we are back at it. I'll tell you, this week's topic is pretty funny. Well, it's not funny, but I laughed. So it's kind of funny, and I'll share with you what it is. But I actually came across this topic yesterday, I think, but I didn't read it until today. I didn't kind of, really, I seen it and kind of caught my attention, but I didn't read it or pay any more attention to it until today. And so this is from the CNN, I guess, newspaper. Actually, CNN Online is where I grabbed it from. But the title of the article, it says that George H.W. Bush responds after actress accuses him of sexual assault. So, of course, this wasn't GW. This is HW. This is the Daddy Bush. So it goes on to say that I'm a young actress. Apparently, she was at a show or promoting a movie or film or something that the Bushes were doing. And so she was there, promoting it in whatever capacity that she was there. But there was an opportunity for a photo op. And so if you guys go online, you'll actually see the picture. I seen a picture and it made it even funnier because, it's just interesting. So what the article said, it says, and this is a young woman's statement. She said, he sexually assaulted me while I was posing for a photo. She said he didn't shake my hand. He touched me from behind, from his wheelchair with his wife by his side. He told me a dirty joke, and then, all while being photographed, he touched me again. So that was her account. So apparently they're taking this photo. You guys will see the photo online if you checked it out. But they're taking a picture. You have George Bush, or H.W. Bush, or George Bush Sr., sitting center in the wheelchair. The woman, I suppose, is to the left of him. And then there's, the Mrs. Bush is on the right. And then there's a slew of other people in the photograph. All the other people in the photograph are men, which is interesting in of itself, but has nothing to do with the story. And so, she makes this statement. She says that he sexually assaulted her while all these people were around. Apparently, he, put his hand on her rear and, touched her from behind. So, a spokesperson. Now, you guys may or may not know. You guys may or may not know. I actually, public and media relations is what I do. And so this is very interesting to read the account and to read specifically the spokesperson, the statement that the spokesperson on behalf of the former president made. So the spokesperson, he actually made two statements. So the first statement, he said, he said, President Bush would never, under any circumstances, intentionally cause anyone distress, and he most certainly apologizes if his attempt at humor offended. So notice that he said he would never, under any circumstances, intentionally, that's an important word, cause anyone distress, and he most sincerely apologizes. Here's another key word, if his attempt at humor offended. So then I guess, I don't know why he thought it was necessary to make a second statement, but they did. They came back and made a second statement. And so his second statement was even more interesting. So the spokesperson says that at 93, President Bush has been confined to a wheelchair for roughly 5 years. So his arm falls on to the lower waist of people. I cannot make this stuff up, guys. This is his spokesperson's actual statement. I have to start over. He said, at 93, President Bush has been confined to a wheelchair for roughly 5 years. So his arm falls to the lower waist of people. The lower waist of people. There is no lower waist. That's the buttocks. His arm falls to the lower waist of people with whom he takes pictures. So this is kind of his natural thing. You're taking a picture. I'm in a wheelchair. My arm is right here. If I put it around you, it's going to hit your butt is basically what he's saying. He says, so to try to put people at ease, the president routinely tells the same joke. And on occasion, he has patted women's rear in what he intended to be a good-natured manner. He pats women in the rear as a gesture of good-natured gesture. So he goes on to say that some sees this as innocent and others view it as inappropriate. And then he says, again, to anyone that he has offended, President Bush apologizes most sincerely. So that's his apology, that I apologize most sincerely. So I laugh at this story, but really it isn't funny. It's almost like ridiculous at this point, right? Every time you turn around, especially here lately, there's like story upon story upon story upon story of some woman somewhere being sexually harassed by some man somewhere, and he just kind of, plays dumb like, I was just kidding. I didn't know you would be offended by that. Look, men, here's a quick, just a quick clue. If you're not bae, like if we're not dating, married, like in a relationship, it is never appropriate for your hand to be anywhere near a woman's rear end. Never. Unless you're a doctor and you're doing some kind of whatever that colonoscopy or something to that effect. But if you're not bae and if you're not a doctor, then you're to be nowhere near a woman's rear. That's the easy one. That's the easy one. For you ladies, here's a quick one. I just want to give this to you guys. Next time a man touches you in an inappropriate way, and you get to decide what inappropriate is. You get to choose that. The next time he touches you in an inappropriate way, I want you to take your hand, open it, and spread your fingers as wide as you can and smack him across his face the way Angela did Marcus in Boomerang. If you guys remember that when Halle Berry smacked Eddie Murphy, that was like the best smack still in cinema history. That was the best smack ever captured on tape. I want you to smack him like that, because here's the thing. When you smack him, it will be clear to him that he did something inappropriate. And as a result, you don't have to explain to people why, or you don't have to explain to people what he did that was inappropriate. All you have to explain, or you probably don't even have to explain, let him explain why you mollywopped him. Let him explain that, why you smacked him. If I was that lady, I would have stretched my fingers as wide as I could, smacked the mess out of him, fixed myself just as prim and proper, and posed for that picture while he's sitting there with that dumb look on his face. Just crazy stuff. Oh, my goodness, just crazy stuff. But I'll tell you guys, I mean, I laugh, but it really isn't funny. I actually, I spent like just under 8 years in the military, and I have had my share, have experienced, firsthand, as well as have, heard from other women, that was in arms with me. We've shared and we've had that experience of being sexually harassed, just inappropriate talk, inappropriate behavior, different things like that. And I was like young when I went into the military, so I can remember, just that feeling of being uncomfortable and sometimes laughing at stuff that really wasn't funny. But then as I got older, I really got more comfortable, even just behavior. I remember being in a meeting one day, and a guy I worked with, he said something, around the table, and I was the only female, woman at the table, and he said something inappropriate, and everybody, ha, 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 it was funny. And I said, be mindful of the company. And that's all I had to say, be mindful of the company. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. And that was it. And I never had an issue with him saying anything inappropriate again. But I'll share this one story with you guys, and this is just like case in point. One of my good friends in the military, we both were NCOs, and she, we were one of just a handful of African American women, NCOs in this particular unit. And I remember she went TDY, which is like they call temporary duty. So she went TDY with one of the officers within the unit. I think it was her, the officer. Maybe there were other people there. I don't recall. But I know the two of them were there. And while they were TDY, the officer thought that it would be appropriate or make sense for him to leave his room, go into her room, and curl into her bed. Now, you might be wondering, how in the world did he get to her room? Well, apparently the hotel that they were staying at had like where they shared the bathroom. And so there was two rooms on either side, but the bathroom was a common space. And so he was able to go from his bathroom to her bathroom, or through the bathroom from his room to her room. And he curled in the bed with her, and he thought that that was appropriate. Well, let me tell you, homegirl reached over, grabbed the lamp off the table, and buzzed him upside his head. With blood coming down his face, he jumped up, gathered his trifling self, and went back to his own room. And so when they returned from the TDY, I remember her telling me the story, and I was like, what? And so that was my dramatic, like, what? I remember her telling me the story, and I was just like, what? And the crazy thing is, while we were talking, this officer actually, the same officer actually came into the office space. And when I tell you, he had a knot on the top of his forehead, the size of Texas. Girl, I'm like, girl, like I'm talking to a girl. I was like, what happened? He said this sorry excuse about how he opened the cabinet door on his head. I'm like, yeah, okay. But with that sorry excuse and the size of that knot on his head, it was no question that she busted him in his head because he did something inappropriate. And I can't remember. I apologize. I think she did, go through the proper channels and file a report and all that stuff. And I think he did end up getting in trouble. So I'm laughing, because this was many years ago, but it was a really serious thing. But my point is until these men really realize, like, what is wrong with them? Like, until they really realize and recognize that it is not appropriate to touch, to grope, to whistle, to any of this stuff to women, until they realize that, ladies, I give you permission to open your hand as wide as your fingers will go and smack him like Angela smacked Marcus on Boomerang. That is my advice. So yeah, that was my top trending topic, y'all. That was a mess. That was an absolute mess. And with all the stuff that's going on, I mean, we still dealing with the same mess, ladies. Still dealing with the same mess. So that is all I got to say about that topic. So many things wrong with the statements, though, but I'm going to leave all that alone. But I'm going to leave you guys on that note to smack them like Angela smacked Marcus on Boomerang. That's my advice. So we're going to take a quick break. As you guys know, if you follow me on social media, tonight we're going to talk about the spirit of things. That's the topic, the topic or the title for tonight's topic. We're going to talk about the spirit of things. And this is going to be really, I'm not even going to set up for what it's going to be. You guys don't want to miss it. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to jump right into the topic of the spirit of things. So we'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back. are back. Like I said, tonight's topic, we're going to talk about the spirit of things. And I have to tell you guys, God is really working on something in me and through me with regards to, the spirituality and spiritual warfare, which is something that I talked in depth about for the past few weeks. If you guys have listened to some of the previous shows, you would have heard me talking about spiritual warfare and talking about it in various different ways. I think if I recall, I started off talking about like agents of the enemy, and so I kind of talked a little bit about that. And I thought after last week that I would be able to transition into something different, but God has brought me right back to the same space. And like I said, he's working on something, so you guys can just bear with me as we get through this. I think that when we get on the other side of this, wherever God is taking this, whether this is the last show or there are multiple shows after this, wherever God is taking this particular lesson, I believe that it, without question, is for purpose. And so when I got up this morning, I was thinking like, okay, Lord, what are we talking about today? And this is how interesting the radio is for me, is because I don't have, like you would think that like last week I would have started thinking about a show for this week. But one of the things I really try to do is just kind of move in the spirit and allow God to work on every platform. I say that often, but allow him to work on every platform. And so this morning when I got up, it's like, okay, Lord, what are we talking about this evening? And he said, the spirit of things. And I sat and I kind of wondered, wow, what does that mean? Like I have in my mind what it means. But what I've learned is that a lot of times when God speaks, it's not, sometimes it's as simple as the words that were spoken. But other times there's something deeper, some underlining something to the words. And so I'm always to just kind of listen and hear and see what God is talking about. And so he gave me that topic, the spirit of things, and he took me to Galatians 5, and I'm going to read, this is the foundation scripture for tonight. So it's Galatians 5, 13. I'll read 13 to 26. And so it starts off, you, my brothers and sisters, and I'm reading from the NIV version. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. If you bite and devour each other, watch out or you will be destroyed by each other. Does that sound familiar based off of some of the topics we talked about in the past few weeks? So verse 16 says, so I say, walk by the Spirit and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with each other, so that you are not to do whatever you want. It goes on to say, but if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. And it says the acts of the flesh are obvious. They're sexual immorality, impurity and debauchery, idolatry and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissension, faction, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. And it says, I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. It says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. It says, those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passion and desire. And since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. And so I love that so much, because when I talk about this thing about, the spirit of things, that's really what we're talking about. And a lot of times, well, we're talking about what it looks like. And so a lot of times, as we've learned over the past few weeks, when we talk about like demonic spirits and, what I talked about the past few weeks, demonic oppression, demonic, demonic oppression, demonic, I can't even remember what it was, obsession, demonic possession. Yeah. When I talk about those things, it was very easy to identify what that looked like. It was very easy to identify, okay, am I walking in the spirit or am I walking in flesh? So if I gave you an example of someone who is, who, for example, shoots into a crowd at a concert or something, that's pretty, you can probably kind of look at that and see that, that is anger. That is, that's one of the demonstrations of fleshly behavior. But sometimes we don't understand where that behavior or where that emotion or whatever you want to call it, where that spirit arises from. Sometimes we don't recognize or realize how the things that we entertain, how they can birth in us or spark in us or influence in us a spirit that is not a fruit of the spirit. And I'll tell you guys, when I talk about spirituality, I always start with Galatians, mainly because it's so easy to identify the difference. It's easy to recognize if I'm in the flesh or if I'm in the spirit. If I'm if I'm experiencing lustful thoughts, lustful desires, things like that, any kind of sexual immorality, 9 times out of 10, or 10 times out of 10, I'm operating in the flesh. But what I love about the fruits of the spirit, in the scriptures, it can't, the fruits of the spirit, it says if you're walking in the fruits of the spirit, then you will not fulfill the lust and the desires of the flesh. So the fruits of the spirit cancels out everything that shows up in the flesh. So for example, we talk about sexual immorality. And given an example, you can take someone who is married perhaps and have relationships with other people. Within the confines of that marriage, if this person was not walking or operating in the flesh, but rather operating in the spirit, then the love that they have, not just for themselves, but the love that they have for their spouse would help them or influence them to not, exercise sexual immorality. The faithfulness, which is one of the fruits of the spirit, would combat this desire to be unfaithful, right? So you can't be faithful and unfaithful at the same time. You're going to be one or the other, and that's why the scripture says that if you walk in the spirit, then you will not fulfill the lust and the desires of the flesh. And so, the fruits of the spirit is a very easy way to start recognizing if you're in the spirit or if you're in the flesh. And so when I talk about things of the spirit, one of the things I say often is that everything is spiritual. And I was actually challenged on that comment by a brother in the faith of mine. We were talking about it, and I made the comment, I said, everything is spiritual. And he kind of gave his perspective on why he didn't believe that everything was spiritual. But I still hold true, because even as we talked about it, I can't remember what his example was, but even as we talked about it, he mentioned something, and I was like, but even the very thought of that is spiritual. We know that, like I talked about before, that the devil can't possess the body of a Christian, but he can certainly, oppress. He can cause situations around you that can leave you oppressed. He can cause situations around you that can create a level of obsession in you. Which goes back to lust, which goes back to sexual immorality. Like, all of this stuff is intertwined. And that's why, as I was studying this lesson, I was like, man, like, this is a lot. And trying to slice it in a way that is, that you can eat it, that you can receive it, is still like a challenge. So I'm going to take my time, I'm going to pace myself, and I'm just going to give it to you guys the way that I received it. But, if you guys remember last week, I think it was, I talked specifically about I think a book that I was going to read, and I shared how this particular book, I had purchased it from. I was getting my car worked on, and I didn't have a book. I usually keep a book in my purse or my bag, but I didn't have one on this particular day. And so I'm at a car dealer's place. They're working on my car. Go to one of the stores nearby, and I grab a book, and it was a book that was I think it was made into a movie, and I think the same time the book came out, the movie was out as well, or they re-released the book. And so I purchased this book because I heard it was like the latest thing that was out, and I purchased it, and I probably didn't get through like the first page of it before I was kind of like, the Spirit of God was just like, throw it away. Not even close it, not even put it down, but throw it away. And I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to read it. I closed it, putting it back in my bag, and I was going to give it away to someone because, like I said, it was a book, and it was a popular movie, a popular book, and I knew a lot of people that would have been interested in, receiving it and reading it. But when I even thought to do that, the Holy Spirit restated, throw it away. And so I ended up just throwing the book away. And that may sound odd to some people, but when you talk about the spirit of things, I'm literally talking about the spirit that things carry with it. And I often talk about the fact, as a writer, as a communicator, I believe that every word that we speak, um, every word that I write, when you watch movies, when you listen to music, like there's a spirit behind it. And I think especially I'm doing like writers workshops, as you guys know, First Reef Publishing is a Christian writing, a Christian publishing house. And so even when I'm doing like writers workshops and I'm talking to Christian writers or aspiring Christian writers, I'm always, careful to share with them the importance of the spirit behind what it is that they're writing. Because writing is nothing more than a level of communication. And when you're communicating, you're trying to convey a thought, you're trying to convey an idea, you're trying to call someone to do something different, you're trying to get someone to agree with you, you're trying to call someone to action, you're trying to bring someone to awareness. Like when you communicate, you do it for the purpose of getting a message from you to someone else. That is the whole purpose of communication. And I said I'm going to do a whole nother thing about communication because I think that's important as well. But when you talk about the spirit of things, as a writer, when I'm sitting down and I'm writing, especially when I'm writing nonfiction or when I'm writing fiction, I'm sorry, you're creating this world, you're creating these characters, you're embodying these characters to bring them to life so that your readers, when they're reading them, they can identify with the characters, they can see themselves in the characters. I think about when I wrote my first book, No Greater Love. And when I was writing the book, because I had put myself on this writing schedule, I actually had a group of readers. And one of the readers, it was like a group of 5 of them. And, one of the male readers in the group, I sent him one particular chapter. And he called me immediately after reading the chapter. And he said, I feel like I need to smoke a cigarette. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he doesn't even smoke. He was like, that was really steamy. But that wasn't what I was going for. So, I really went back and rewrote that part of the story because that's not what I was going for. But the reality is that when I was writing that scene, if any of you guys that's listening has heard No Greater Love, the 2 main characters, it was like, this build up of the 2 of them coming together. And so now here we are at the moment when they come together, and I just like really went for it. And it wasn't raunchy, it wasn't because it is Christian writing, but I really wanted to capture that emotion between a man and a woman who were attracted to each other. And now here they are in this moment where they can physically show that attraction. And I just really kind of went there. Again, nothing raunchy, nothing that my grandmother could read. I mean, she could, she probably wouldn't want to, but she could. But once he said that, and I kind of went back and looked at it, I rewrote it because that wasn't the emotion or the feeling that I was trying to invoke. What I was trying to invoke was this attraction. And sometimes I think when we watch movies or we read books and we engage in things that we call entertainment, we don't really take care in seeing how those things make us feel, how they leave us. I can use that example when I wrote No Greater Love, but I can also use so many examples of different books that I've read, movies that I won't watch because you can get, as soon as it comes on the screen, you kind of like and so so there's an energy and a spirit behind everything. And as believers, particularly, I'm always talking when I do these shows. I appreciate people who are maybe still searching and trying to figure out, the faith or trying to figure out if Christianity is for them. But when I do these shows, I'm really talking from the perspective of a Christian woman, from the perspective of someone who is sold out to the faith, and so I'm really just talking to my peers in the faith. And so I really think that it's important for us to understand that sometimes the things that we engage in, we think that, oh, no, it's just a movie or it's just a song, or like I joked last week about that Cardi B song. And I was like, I was so glad that somebody did a Christian version of that, because I'm telling you, I was at work and I could not get that song out of my head. And the lyrics are just, they're nonsense. But I'm telling you, it's something about that beat that I was like, I cannot get this out of my head. But stuff like that. And if you really pay attention, like honestly, if you really pay attention to maybe some of your favorite shows that you're even, watching now. Like last night I watched this show and I laughed and I thought it was hilarious. But like I screamed like I was in the show. It was like this, I mean, it was some reality show. And they were in a haunted house or something. And so with every boom and all that stuff, I was like screaming and jumping. And, my heart was racing at one time. I had the blanket over my head. Just all of these things. And we don't realize how those emotions can kind of, shift us. And the reason that I say everything is spiritual and the reason that I look at it not simply as entertainment, but as something spiritual is because it shifts our thinking. It shifts the way, it shifts our comfort level. And I really believe that everything that we do either draws us closer to Christ or pushes us further away from him. And so even in the things that we consider entertainment, there's something spiritually that's happening. Another example I'll give you guys, as you know, I always do like the top trending topic at the top of the show. And every week I threaten that I'm not going to do that anymore because of the emotional stress that I go through to look at the news. As you guys know, I'm not, I don't watch the news. I'm not a watcher of the news. I don't stay engaged in, and what's going on in the news like that. Not until I added that to season 2 of Girlfriend Therapy that I will do the top trending topics. And so with that, I've been kind of engaged a little bit. But the last time that I was really like watching the news, engaged in the news, is I was an undergraduate student at Bowie State University studying communications. That's where I got my undergraduate degree in public relations. And so a part of what we had to do as a PR, student was really be engaged in the news, and we were engaged in politics and just everything that was going on. And if you guys heard, like at the top of the show, where I was laughing about the top trending topic and kind of pointing out some of those, some of those words that was used in the spokesman's statement. So that was like the last time that I was really engaged in the news. And during that time, we had 9/11, and I remember watching the people around me. First of all, I remember. When everything happened, I was actually in class that day. And then I remember driving from class after we learned that the first plane had hit. And then, I'm driving. I was going to pick my children up from school. My husband, who worked in D.C. at the time, of course, could not get in contact with him. But I remember driving down the road, and I was at the traffic light when the second plane hit. And I was listening to the news on the radio. And I will never forget the scream of the news reporter. I guess she was there, in New York at the time that it was happening, reporting right there live. And I never forget the scream and just the energy behind, what she was seeing and how she was reporting it. And I'll tell you, for days after that, everybody was like glued to the television because we could not believe that something like that had happened on U.S. soil. Like it was something that was completely foreign to just about all of us. And so we didn't know how to process it. We didn't know what to do with it. And I'll tell you that I had people who were confident, who were smart, who were educated. And I'm thinking specifically about one of my professors. She was so knocked off center behind the 9/11, just like most of us were. But I mean, she was to the point where she was so afraid. She ended up getting on medication. Like it was really traumatic for her. And I'm not saying that, you don't engage and you don't know what's going on. But I think when you sit and you inundate yourself with, with messages that are not uplifting, that are not edifying, that are not, conducive to the fruits of the Spirit, which is something that, makes you feel the joy of love, something that gives you peace. If you're watching something and it makes you afraid and it makes you, just feeling hopeless and all these different, then it would make sense to disengage from that stuff, right? But the crazy thing is because of the spiritual pull to it, a lot of times you'll find yourself drawn to it. And it's like it's an obsession. I actually, and I'm going to share this with you guys, the show Power. I watched it season 2, was immediately addicted to the show, and then went back and watched season 1. I guess did they just finish season 3? I don't know what season we're in. I'll tell you, this last season, I felt like Pookie from New Jack City. I could not wait for the next episode. Like, I'm online trying to figure out. And then when they had the leak, oh my goodness, I'm like, somebody send me that link. You know, it was like you're completely addicted to something that was totally not edifying, that had no moral value to it, that had no, it was entertainment, right? And so, but then you think about like how you're watching the show and you're like, I can't stand this person. I hate King. You know, you're all these emotions that like really take you somewhere. I mean, I remember the episode where the little girl got shot. I was just like devastated as if this was real. So my point is that there are things that we give our time to, inspire our attention to, that, like everything else, either draws us closer to Christ or pulls us further away from Christ. And I'm not saying that, you're not supposed to watch TV, but I love to do things with eyes wide open. And so that's my suggestion, is instead of defending like why I feel this rage when I watch, Keenan on Power or whoever, recognize that it's not a good space. Recognize that it's not a good space. Another thing I wanted to share when I talk about the spirit of things, another thing along with the TVs that you watch or the TV shows that you watch or the movies that you watch, and the books that we read, another thing is the music that we listen to. I kind of talked a little bit about it when I was talking about Cardi B, but I talked specifically like about the lyrics. But I would present to you also that even music that is instrumental carries with it a spirit. And I don't think it's any coincidence that it was like the minister of music, because you can really hear you can really feel the spirit of music. And people say that all the time, and a lot of musicians say that as well. I remember one friend of mine who's a musician, and he's like, he's like, I feel music. Like he wasn't, professionally trained or whatever. He was just like, I feel music. And if that's not spiritual, I don't know what is. But I'll share with you guys a story that my husband shared with me. And this was many years ago, where he was traveling, and he was staying at a hotel. And he talked about how he had left his hotel room, and he was, going to figure out what he was going to do that evening. And so when he came down to like the ballroom area of the hotel, he said that there was he heard like drums, just like these drums beating. And so he's, curious, and it's like, oh, where are those drums coming from? And so he goes into the ballroom, and he's like, when he walks in, the more he walks, he's like, the heavier his legs felt. He was like he just couldn't walk. Like the more he walked in, the heavier his legs felt. So he said he started backing out of the room because he was aware that, man, as I walk in here, for some reason, this is heavy. And he was like, he didn't, realize what was going on. He just heard the drums. And so now he's backing himself out of his ballroom. And he says once he gets out, he closes his door, and he looks over to the side, and he sees there's a sign that is a witches conference. So, or some kind of witch something at the hotel room or at the hotel. And so they're playing these drums, and whatever spirit was, that music was conjuring up, his spirit obviously didn't bear witness to that spirit. So the spirit of God in him was like, no, bro, you need to get out of here. So when we start talking about, like I talked about before, when we start talking about things such as last week or the week before, when I talked about demonic possession, demonic obsession, demonic oppression, when I talked about those things, what I want to take a step back and just let you guys know is that those spirits start somewhere. A lot of times when you see a lot of these mass shootings, particularly with these young people, the first thing they want to blame it on is the video games they've been watching or the rap music they've been listening to. And then you get people protesting, rap music didn't never kill anybody, and it hasn't. But if we understand the implications that spirits carry across music, across television shows, across movies, across all these different things, if we understand that there is, in fact, a spirit that carries with those things, and we will understand and know how to better guard ourselves and protect ourselves from those. Now, you're probably listening like, this is so extreme, but it really isn't. Like, in our minds, it may feel extreme because we're so used to just kind of entertaining ourselves and not thinking twice about it. I'll share this with you guys as well. I mean, it's like I can tell you by example better than I can just really kind of, it's like case in point. I can do that better than just telling you what I know about the spirit of things. But I'll share with you guys an example. I remember years ago, there was a season when God really took me away from secular music. Like, when I first became a Christian, I was still listening to music. I think I shared, I got saved in 1991, and when I gave my life to Christ, saved in 1991. And I think around 90, maybe 93, 94, God just took me away from secular music, and I couldn't listen to it. And I remember it was around the time when Bone Thugs and Harmony, Crossroads came out, and I would play that song all the time. And of course, I've always been a Tupac fan, so I play Tupac all the time. But I remember God just shutting that down and removing that from me, and I wasn't able to. And it wasn't like I wasn't able to, like, if I listened to it, I got sick or anything. It was the Holy Spirit said, don't listen to that. And so there was a season when I didn't listen to it, and it was during that time that I really understood the spiritual implications of the music that we listen to. So, I mean, I hope this is making sense. Like I said, I'm trying to slice it in a way that makes sense. And the best thing that I can give, more than just talking about it, is examples. And I say it's spiritual because, or I talk about the spiritual implications of the things, because it's, like I said, anytime you're communicating, it's to shift your thinking. That's what communication is. That's what, if you're listening to a song and someone's talking about, like even the songs nowadays, you don't even have to listen hard to find songs that are just, in your face, fleshly. Like, nothing, there's nothing fruit of the spirit about a lot of these songs. You can go to the, just pull up any top 10 song and listen to it, and there's nothing edifying about it. So you don't even have to go far. But what I'm talking about are those things that, like, when you're listening to, lyrics of a rap song or whatever, and they're cussing and they're saying all these different derogatory, words and all this stuff, that's really clear. But when you listen to something, and I'll use, for example, I remember Maxwell. Yeah, I don't even know which CD of his it was, but I remember a coworker like, oh, I got this Maxwell CD, and I'm like, oh, let me listen to it. And I can't remember the song, I can't remember the CD, but this was probably 10 years ago, probably even longer than that, probably about 10 or 12 years ago. And I popped that CD in, and when I tell you, that music was so sensual, I'm like, and not that I'm like a prude or anything, like, I've been married for 25 years, so, me and babe, we're good. But I don't want to be at work, feeling lustful. And that's what that was, the energy or the spirit that music had behind it, was a lustful feeling. And I can't even explain it, but I would imagine that as you guys are listening to this, and you have your own examples, you can think of yourself in a club, the haze. In fact, I'll give you one other one. Like I said, I have examples all day. Probably about 2 years ago, Babe and I went to a poetry club. Babe loves to do spoken word poetry. I just go along to listen and support. But we went to a poetry club, and we hadn't been in a club environment in years. That's just not our thing. But we're in this club environment. The vibe was good, but I can feel the spirit of that place. And I'm sitting there, and I'm trying to be comfortable. And it's like, all right, we can navigate this. We can do this, And Babe got up. He was like one of the first few people to do his poetry. And, we're like, we're going to sit here. We're going to vibe out, drink our little sodas or whatever, and we're going to have a good time. And, of course, I don't know if you guys have listened to spoken word poetry these days. It is very raunchy, vulgar. whatever word you want to put on it. And I just grew, I mean, both of us just grew more and more uncomfortable. And it was very clear that it was spiritual. And at one point, we kind of looked over at each other and it was like this is, this is something, like there's something going on here that really wasn't, wasn't conducive to the God in us. And again, I don't say this to sound like, you know, uptight or any of those things, but just really for you guys to start thinking about the things that you introduce into your psyche, the things that you introduce into, uh, just your space, I remember pastors always talking about, protecting your eye gates and your ear gates and all that stuff. And it really is important, it really is important that we pay attention to those things that we lend ourselves to. I talked last week when I talked about, I used a quote from Dave Ramsey. I think I talked about it last week, but I used a quote from Dave Ramsey where he talked about, as it pertains to finances. But his quote was that every penny has an assignment. And I since added my own thoughts to that, my own 2 cents, get it? Added my own 2 cents to that. And I said that every purpose has an assignment. And because I know that we all have a purpose, and this is probably the root of it all, because we all have a purpose. And I know that there is an enemy whose purpose is to steal, kill, and destroy. And if he can't, flat out, outright get you entangled in some level of bondage that will surely, or has the potential to surely take your life, then he will slowly pull you into a world of sin, bit by bit, piece by piece, that will have you, like, before you know it, you have stepped so far outside of your lines, outside of your boundaries, that you don't even recognize yourself anymore. I was listening to one of my favorite men of the faith, Dr. Ravi Zacharias, and he's an apologetic. And he was talking about, he was speaking at a college campus, and he talked about how one of the top things that a lot of the students was talking to him about was sexual immorality, specifically like, pornography and different things like that. And just looking at that by itself and seeing how that opens things up, you can take someone who, again, that's in the confines of a marriage, and one or both, or either the man or the woman in that relationship, due to whatever situation or circumstances, become addicted to pornography. And if you can understand how the spirit of that, if you're watching pornography, what that spirit is, and then see how that can taint and pervert a normal sex life, a normal relationship, then you have to understand how things carry with it a spirit. And again, it doesn't even have to be something so overt. But in this case, what Dr. Ravi Zacharias was talking about, he's like these young people that they have become, it started off with pornography, and then it rolled into something else, and then it becomes like, and now next thing you know, they're saying that the people they're sex addicts, and they have all of these different proclivities towards, just perverse sexual behavior, and how it started with just an idea, with just a thought, with just a clip, with just a picture, or just a something, how it starts, and then how it can spiral into something that can certainly, take your life. And so when you watch, your next housewives of whoever, and as they are cussing and fussing and fighting, and I don't know if that's all they do, but as they're cussing and fussing and fighting, think about how you feel. Think about how it makes you feel. Have you ever watched something and you become so angry because someone else is angry? You have to know that that's communicating something to you. I pray that this is making sense. But just paying attention to those things and how it communicates stuff to you. I remember back when I was able to, listen back to rap music And I don't now only because I think I'm older and I just really don't have time. And I can't even think of anybody that I would listen to anyway. Um, but I remember this was several years ago. I was driving into work and I was listening to DMX, and I was just like hype. And I'm driving through, driving on a highway, and I'm like whizzing in and out. Like that was spiritual. That wasn't just me enjoying the music and driving like I didn't have any sense. That was spiritual. That was me opening myself to something via this music, via the anger and the energy, stuff that was coming through the speakers of this song, the lyrics and all that stuff that completely changed and, like I said, shaped the way I was seeing things, shaped the way I was thinking about things. And even as a believer, like I said, I'm not sitting here, or at least I don't want to give the impression that I'm sitting here like I have it all together and like I don't watch reality television. Trying to think. Like I think I mentioned before, I love Little People Everything, so I do watch reality TV. So I'm not trying to present it as if I don't watch anything or if I don't listen to different music. Like I said, that Cardi B song, I had to seriously get set free from that because that beat was just, and even listening to that, even listening to that, using that as an example, it's just like, if I don't see you and I don't speak, that means I don't mess with you. Like, what kind of hate is that? Like, that's not love. But those are the kind of lyrics that's in that song. And you throw that over like a crazy beat and you just don't even know what you're saying, don't even know what you're repeating. But I digress. But my point is, it's just to really kind of prove to just really kind of point out the fact that a lot of the things that we listen to, if we're not conscious of what it is that we're listening to, one of the things that people always talk about is being woke, staying woke, being woke, staying woke. It's like, what does that mean? And I think people have their different ideas with that. But if I was to say stay woke as it pertains to spiritual things, I would encourage you to pay attention to the music that you listen to, pay attention to the movies that you watch, the TV shows that you watch. I know one of the terminologies that they often use for reality TV is mindless television, and we know Scripture says that idle mind is the devil's workshop. And so when you're watching these shows and you're listening to this music, just pay attention to how you feel on the inside. Are you reading things? And I have a ton of books. If you guys could see my office, I have I don't know how many bookshelves in my office. I have a lot of bookshelves in my office and a lot of books. And you're not going to find anything on my shelf that's nonsense. You're going to find things that's edifying, that's uplifting, that's encouraging, that's inspiring. And you just have to really, be careful and take care into surrounding yourself. And there are things, even I think on television, that you can watch that's not over the top. And one thing that might be over the top, I'll make this statement. One thing that might be over the top for one person might be completely fine for the other. And so you have to pay attention to that. I'll tell you, my husband and I, we're watching a movie. He may say, well, I don't want to watch that. Like, it doesn't agree with his spirit. And my spirit might be like, oh, I'm fine with it, depending on what it is. But I wouldn't watch it because it's not good for him, and vice versa. And so just really, if you didn't hear anything else that I talked about during tonight's show, I just want to encourage you to listen to or pay attention to the things that you are giving your attention to and how those things are making you feel. If they're making you angry. And I will close with this last point. Speaking of anger, and this is really wrapping everything up back from the beginning of season 2 of Broken Therapy Radio, when I started talking about agents of the enemy, and I started talking about, I think during that week it was like hurricanes or something else was going on. But I talked about how all of the stuff that we're seeing in the news, all of the stuff that we're seeing in the media, like people are angrier than ever. And if there was not a spirit upon all of the stuff that we are seeing, like you don't even have to be you didn't even have to be in Charlottesville to be angry by what the news media was showing you. That's another case in point. It's like, I'm not there. I'm not even physically in a space, but you're watching on TV and you're watching the anger and the hatred and the evil that these people are spewing. And that same anger, hatred, evil, all that same spirit is connecting to you via the airwaves, via the videos that we watch on repeat. Is connecting to you. And now you go to work and you're looking at that coworker that you've worked with for years. Now you're looking at them with a side eye because they are different hues than you are. Now, you know, they don't know how they feel about you. You don't know how to feel about them. All of a sudden, but over the past 15 years that y'all worked together, y'all had never had any issues. Now, all of a sudden, you don't even know how you feel about each other. That's just, you know, another case in point of how anger and hatred and just the spirit of stuff, how it can really infiltrate not just you, but an environment, a community, how it can just really infiltrate and just kind of, disrupt or draw you further from the things of God. So I pray that makes sense. I'm telling you guys, like I said, God is really working on something with this. And I'm sure that as the days go by, I don't think this is the last message that I'll do on this. And as God just continues to give me more revelation about it and more understanding, then I'll continue to talk about it. But I think bottom line is just really paying attention. Like if there's one last thought, the bottom line is to pay attention to the things that you listen to, the things that you watch, the things that you give your time and your attention to, and see and note how those things make you feel. Do they make you feel like the fruits of the Spirit, which is love, joy, peace, temperance, long-suffering? Does it make you feel that? Or does it make you feel like I don't want to say fruits of the flesh, but the things of the flesh? You know, does it make you feel lustful? Does it make you feel hatred or discord or jealousy and all those different things? So that is pretty much it, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Like I said, God's working on something, and I'm sure we'll continue on this topic of the spirit of things. So thank you guys again for listening. Until next time, I bid you guys God's best blessings. Until next time, blessings.